Now, in the run-up to the presidential elections, which of course is 2 weeks away today, we're looking at the people behind the potential presidents. Last week we tackled Sean Gallagher, but this week it's Diana's turn, coincidentally, after her outburst last night on prime time. We'll get to that presently. She criticised the vile and false allegations that she said were being made against members of her family last night on prime time. She refused, however, to elaborate on the allegations, but said they would soon surface in the media. Of course, she's an ex-Eurovision winner who's used to being in the spotlight, though perhaps not always for the reasons that she wants in particular. Today we're looking at Diana's background, her suitability for the presidency, what exactly makes her tick. And to discuss this, I'm joined by Mick, Clifford, who's a journalist who's been covering the presidential election for the Irish Examiner, spending time with the candidates, and indeed by our own political editor, Shane Coleman. Mick, maybe I can start with you. And let's go straight to what happened on prime time last night. In your piece in the paper today, which presumably was written obviously before what happened on prime time last night, you said that she sort of knows herself that she's not going to win. So do you think her outburst last night on prime time was a bit of attention seeking? Was it a bit of a showmanship?
Oh no, John, I wouldn't have thought that was the case. I would say it was more to do with she was naive in her outburst, in that it would certainly seem that somebody approached, she said it was in relation to a family member. The background to the thing would certainly seem to be that some media element, some media organ, some journalist, whatever, approached her or somebody associated with her in relation to a particular allegation, and this obviously prompted her to make that statement.
As in to get her retaliation in first.
In the media, as we know, it very frequently happens that allegations and stuff arise, somebody against whom they're made are approached with the allegation, they deny it, there's absolutely no substance to it, and that is the end of that. That is a very frequent occurrence. What seems to have happened here is that when she was approached, or whomever close to her was approached, they immediately thought that this story was going to go ahead, and it was obviously something they totally refuted, and she acted on that. Now, whereas it seems she would have been far better advised to say absolutely nothing and to see whether or not this story stood up and actually appeared in the media.
Well, of course, it didn't appear, Shane. That's the whole thing. And I mean, certainly the feeling last night seemed to be that she made this because a statement in one of the papers was imminent. Nothing happened?
Nothing happened, and I think Mick is absolutely spot on. I think what she was trying to do, naively perhaps, was get her defence in first, which is all very well if this piece is going to appear. But now that it hasn't appeared, people are now wondering what's all this about, and there's going to be inevitably lots of speculation, however unfortunate that is. And you have to say, from a PR point of view, the move backfired completely.
And she has no engagements today. So she's all the other 6 candidates are out canvassing and meeting and talking to the media and whatever. Dan is nowhere to be seen. So this is just going to keep hounding until she comes out and actually says something, isn't it?
Well, you'd have to imagine that every engagement she does have from now on, people are going to be asking her, what are these allegations about? And she's clearly not going to go into them, and that's obviously understandable. But why bring them up in the first place, unless it's, as Mick said, that she thought this story was going to appear and she wanted to get her defence in first. But she appeared deeply upset on the programme.
She did, but as I was saying to you just before we came on air, she still held on to that piece of paper. She went through her points that she was making in her debate, in the actual debate, for the best part of an hour before it was her turn to sort of close at the end, and then she brought up this statement.
Yeah, I presume, John, the reason why she didn't bring it up at the start was because she knew Miriam O'Callaghan would spend the next hour saying, but what are these allegations? So what she said, like, this is get my defence in first, but I'll do it at the very end. And yes, she might ask me a couple of times what it's about, but I'll be able to stonewall that, and that's exactly what she did.
Okay, let's park that for a minute and let's talk about Diana herself. Mick, if I can turn to you, I mean, just as I said at the beginning there, you sort of were making the point in your piece in the Examiner today that she really knows herself that she's not going to win, but that's not really what her campaign is about.
Yes, well, no, John, I don't know for a fact that she knows that, but one would imagine that if she had any sort of analysis of the situation at all, she must have come to that conclusion. But there's no doubt that there's also a political element to her campaign. Diana is very openly so very much of the pro-life movement. She has very strong religious beliefs in that regard, and very strong beliefs around abortion and all those issues that come under the heading family values. And in a scenario like that, not dissimilar, I might say, to Martin McGuinness and Sinn Féin, there's a theory abroad that Sinn Féin aren't really that interested in winning. It would be a big bonus, but their main thing is to increase the party vote as a result of everything that surrounds a presidential election. Similarly, I think it would be reasonable to surmise that in Diana's case, in coming forward on her pro-life platform, that there will be efforts to mobilise that vote and effectively to keep it alive. Also, people in the pro-life movement are continually saying that they're not very well represented in politics. One could just merely look at how easy Diana got nominated, which would give lie to that. But that her candidacy will again bring some publicity around that issue and perhaps draw people to their standard.
But then go where? Because like that has a lifespan of the 8 weeks or whatever length of time. In her case, just over 3 weeks in terms of her nomination through to election day. Then, assuming she doesn't make it across the finishing line, what happens next in terms of her cause?
As Mao Zedong said about the French Revolution, it's way too early to tell that, John. I mean, from the point of view, listen, this is a very long war. This and the pro-life movement do see themselves in that scenario whereby what they perceive as very over-secularization of society is an ongoing thing at every juncture, most recently in the Civil Partnership Bill, and basically to mobilise people who are of their persuasion and to get them more involved and perhaps to move on from there politically. But it's most certainly not a short-term thing. I think they see this as very much a long, long war.
Shane Coleman, it strikes me that depending on what age you are, what generation you are, you could see Diana in a few ways. Singer, as in Eurovision star. Politician, last time she had to go for the presidency, she got elected as an MEP and then had a shot at the Dáil. A reality TV star. And all the way in there is the whole Catholic thing going on.
Yeah, businesswoman, I suppose, as well, because herself and her husband had a very successful recording business, which was obviously the subject of that dispute in Iowa with her sister. But look, first and foremost, she's best known as the girl, basically. I think she was 18 years old when she won the 1970 Eurovision Song Contest, singing all kinds of everything. She'd come from a very musical family. Her father played a trumpet in a band called the Imperial All-Stars. Her mother used to guest on that band as a pianist. So grew up in, I think it was the Cregan in Derry, and then moved to the Bogside, I think, after that. Very kind of nice, well-mannered Derry girl, kind of charmed the nation, and then grew up. Her musical career was pretty successful, maybe not as successful as might have been expected after she won the Eurovision Song Contest, but still very successful. And then, of course, moved into this Christian music. 1980 or 1979, when the Pope came, she released, I'm old enough to remember, Totus to Us, and it was #1 for weeks, and then there was an album on the back of it. Yeah. And that opened up the American market and this, the Christian music market, and she started to release albums there. And her family actually relocated to Birmingham, Alabama, I think, in 1990, and a lot of success there. She hosted a TV show and a radio show over there and released a lot of albums and did very, very well. But then, as you say, politics called, and it really was the 1997 presidential election,
where nobody expected her to come in third.
Nobody, and I mean, to be honest, she started off the campaign, and not quite. I mean, it'd be unfair to say a laughing stock. That would be unfair. But she wasn't taken seriously at the start of the campaign. But by the end of the campaign, I can tell you, she was taken seriously, because she fought a really good campaign, and she did, speak, I suppose, or sought to speak for those people who she would argue have been marginalised, more conservative voters. Sort of old values or whatever, and she fought a really good campaign.
And to get herself into the race, let's not forget, she had to go the council route, and nobody had done that before.
First time ever done. Yeah. She got the four councils, and she performed very credibly in that presidential election. Got 15% of the vote, came third ahead of the Labour Party candidate, and then on the back of that won a European seat in 1999. So I mean, she was very much on the up at that point. Crucially then, she contested the 2002 general election in Galway West, I think it was. A lot of people thought she was going to win a seat. Performed quite poorly in that. Also, in the meantime, opposed the abortion referendum the government had brought in, and that the church had given its implicit backing to. She opposed it on the grounds it didn't kind of go far enough. It was quite a complex issue. Basically, she felt life wasn't protected from conception rather than implantation or whatever. Very complex. Anyway, it was a crucial factor in that abortion referendum being defeated, because obviously a lot of people of a liberal persuasion were opposed to it. They joined forces to defeat it. Lost, didn't get in 2002, and then lost her European seat in 2004, and has been, I suppose, pushed to the margins.
Well, don't forget though, she did try to challenge Mary McAleese in 04, but she didn't get the nomination from the councils.
She didn't get the nomination, and I mean, she was on a hide into nothing with that. I mean, anyone, I mean, the main political parties decided they weren't going to oppose Mary McAleese. So it's something of a surprise she came back into it this time, and very last minute.
Last minute stuff.
I mean, she described it as a very arduous process to get the nomination.
She had them wrapped up in 24 hours.
She got it in about about 3 days.
We're talking about Dana today with our political editor Shane Coleman and Mick Clifford from the Irish Examiner. We were talking about Sean Gallagher a few days ago, looking at his profile. We'll be going through all the candidates over the next few days, all ahead of our presidential debate in partnership with Google, of course. That takes place on Monday the 24th of October here on Lunchtime, the most interactive debate ever in Ireland. For more details and to get your questions in, goes to newstalk.ie. Mick Clifford, back to you again. In terms of how Dana is running her campaign, in terms of her daily canvass, her occasion, she didn't really have that many press conferences, really. It's more sort of on the stump doorsteps. How does she interact with people?
Well, she interacts with people very well in general, John. I have to say, I was out with her the other day, and there's no doubt that there is a certain affection there for her. Other people, the interesting aspect to it is other people will approach candidates and they like to meet them, that wattage of celebrity or what have you. But with Dana, there's a great warmth there, and she reciprocates that. Instead of just kissing babies, I mean, she hugs, kisses. She's that lovely way of extending her hand onto people's arm, and her face is constantly in sympathy with people. And, it's a genuine type of warmth that's there for her. Having said that, what I found noticeable, and having been out with a few of the candidates, is whereas people have a great welcome for her, very often some of them are not as committed to saying that they will give her a vote. So there's definitely some affection there for her. Whether or not that would translate into people wanting her to be president is another matter. Her campaign, compared to the others, is also, I'd say, slightly threadbare. She has a number of people with her. There are some leaflets. There are no stickers, for instance, which is a great way of campaigning in these things. She has no posters. It's very much family-orientated to the extent that her husband and her brother are very much at the head of the operation. And it would certainly be nowhere near as professional as some of the other campaigns, but there is also a certain network there through the pro-life movement that lend a hand towards her.
All right then, Shane Coleman, to finish up on this piece then, where do you see the Dana campaign going from now? I mean, nobody expected what happened last night, so we still have 2 weeks to go.
We do. A long way to go. This day, 2 weeks, is polling day. Dana's biographer, Ken Murray, has basically said that Dana is going to issue a further statement to clarify her position in the coming days, and I think this issue is going to dominate for the 2 weeks unless it's clarified. Look, the reality is she was, I think, at 6% in the polls. She's going to struggle, I think, to get into the race to any meaningful degree. As Mick says, she's barely campaigning. I mean, the fact she isn't campaigning today, I mean, with 2 weeks to go, it's extraordinary. No posters. It seems to be run on quite a tight budget, very much, I suppose, a family affair. I have to say, I'm slightly puzzled as to why she entered the race in the first place. She doesn't seem to me as someone whose heart is really, really in the race. I saw her asked at one stage why she wanted to become president. She seemed to hesitate for quite a period of time, as if she actually didn't almost know the answer to that. So, look, I can't see her coming anywhere other than last, unfortunately, in the race come Friday week.
Shane Coleman, our political editor, thanks indeed, and thank you also to Mick Clifford from the Irish Examiner.